This is the second video analysis for my grade 5 learner.
An advecture of two water drops.
The reader mispronounced the word adventure as advecture. She also omitted the letter S for the word drops.
Peter and Pater are two drops of water. They are great friends.
The reader omitted the S for the word drops, the same thing as the word friends.
Who usually travel and the water cycle to enter.
The learner mispronounced usually as usually, the same thing as travel, and she mentioned it as travel. The learner also inserted the word and mispronounced the word together as together.
One day, some things happened in the middle of a puddle and the two were separated.
The learner inserted S in the word something that made it somethings. She omitted the ed for the word happened, and she also mispronounced the word separated, and she read it as separated.
Sometimes later, Peter and Pater meet again in a cloud.
The learner inserted S in the word sometime that made it sometimes. Instead of met, she read it as meet. She replaced the word a with the and successfully corrects herself in the second attempt.
After a joyful reunion and the two told her own stories.
At first, she mispronounced it as reun, and after second attempt, she successfully corrected herself in the word reunion. She inserted and in the middle of reunion and the. The reader replaced the word there with here. And she mispronounced the word stories to stories.
You would believe it, said Pater. 1 minute I was with you in the puddle, and the next minute I was gone.
The reader mispronounced the word wouldn't as would, and instead of paddle, she mentioned it as paddle. She also inserted S in the word minute.
A big, round, pink tongue.
The reader mispronounced the word rough as round. At first, she mentioned tongue correctly, and in her second attempt, she read it as tongue.
Swooped down and picked Pater up.
For the word swoop, she mentioned on her first attempt hop, and then swoop, and then swooped. She unsuccessfully corrected herself. For the word picked, she attempted it at first for pick, and then picked, and then lastly pick. She unsuccessfully corrected herself.
Guard.
Instead of figured, she mentioned it as figure.
Out that it was a dog's tongue. Pater went into a dark, warm place. Lots.
At first attempt, she omitted the S for the word lots, and then for the second attempt, she mentioned it lots. She successfully corrected herself.
Of other drops were there. Pater went in the stomach.
The learner omitted the word to in the full word into and mispronounced the word stomach into stomach,
where he had to share and space
The learner replaced the word the with end.
with some slimy dog.
Instead of slimy, the learner pronounced it as slimy 2 times. She unsuccessfully corrected herself.
Food, green beans, a penny, and the end of an ice cream cone. It was quit.
The learner mispronounced the word quiet as quit.
A party atmosphere.
The learner mispronounced the word atmosphere as atmosphere.
He spin, sometimes traveling throughout.
Instead of spent, the learner mispronounced it as spent. The learner also inserted s in the word times. She then mispronounced the word traveling to traveling, and instead of through, she mentioned throat.
The dogs, desertive system.
She initially mentioned dog and then attempted to correct herself dogs. She successfully corrected herself. She mispronounced the word digestive. She have it as deservative. And for the system, she mentioned it as system.
Before he was left in some grass by the side of the round.
Instead of road, she mentioned it as round. She attempted to correct herself, but she was unsuccessful.
The warm sun beat down
Instead of beat, she mentioned bet.
on butter, and the other drops of water. Some of the drops sucked.
She mispronounced the word soaked and then tried to correct it by sack and then sacked. She unsuccessfully corrected herself.
Into the drops, but not butter. Sun, he become heated.
The learner replaced the word ground to drops. Instead of soon, she mispronounced it as sun. She also mispronounced the word became as become, as well as heated to heated.
And began his journey back up through the sky into the clouds.
Instead of through, she mispronounced it as drought.
He and many other drops were jetting
She mispronounced the word getting as jetting.
together.
For the word together, she firstly mentioned together and then she successfully corrected herself with the word together.
Forming the cloud. Then, when he had Peter,
She firstly mentioned then and then successfully corrected herself with the word when. And instead of spotted, she did mention spotter.
and that's what happened, said Peter. What happened to you? Well, answered Peter. We were talking, and when I turned around,
She mispronounced the word turned and then attempted to correct herself 2 times with the word torn.
you were gone. So other drops.
The learner replaced the pronoun I to a.
Racing into the ground.
On her first attempt, she mentioned it as round and then successfully corrected herself with the word ground.
And south thought.
The reader mispronounced the word thought and mentioned it twice with the word south. She unsuccessfully corrected herself.
You had gone ahead so quickly.
She replaced the pronoun I to a.
Follow them.
For the word followed, she first attempted followed, and then the next one would be follow. She unsuccessfully corrected herself.
Peter went sliding down.
At first, she mispronounced it as sliding and successfully corrected herself with the word sliding.
Drought sand
Instead of through, she mispronounced it as drought.
and soil and between rock until she fell into.
She omitted the sound of rocks and she mispronounced the word until and pronounced it as until. And instead of fell, she pronounced it as well.
An other round river.
Instead of underground, she mentioned it as other drowned and attempted to correct it by round and then successfully corrected herself.
There she met millions of other drops that were on an underground
The learner repeated the words on an.
roller coaster ride.
At first, she read it as coaster and successfully corrected herself with the word coaster.
They bumped against rock.
Instead of bumped, she mispronounced it as bumped. The learner also omitted the sound of rocks.
And coasted small.
Instead of coaxed, she mentioned it as coashed. She also mispronounced the word small and pronounced it as small.
Pieces to join them on their trips.
She inserted the S in the word trip that made it trips.
They sweep along onion who would.
The learner mispronounced the word swept as sweep. Instead of anyone, she mentioned it as anion. The word wood was mispronounced as well as wall.
Come with them until they slowed and joined.
She mispronounced the word until and mentioned it as until. On her first attempt, she mentioned it as slowed, and then in the second attempt, it's slowed. The same thing for the joined word, she mispronounced it as joined.
A great like.
Instead of lake, she mispronounced it as like.
Slowly over time, Peter walked.
She mispronounced the word worked and mentioned it as walk, and on her second attempt, walked.
Her way up trout at the thermal.
Instead of through, the learner mispronounced it as trout. And she also mispronounced the word thermal. She have it as thermal.
Layer of the lake until
She mispronounced again the word lake and have it as laek. The same thing as for the word until, she have it as until.
found herself at the surface. The warm sun beat down
Instead of beat, she have it as bet.
on Peter's sun. She became heated and
She mispronounced the word soon as sun. The same thing as the word became, she mentioned it as become. The learner also mispronounced the word heated and have it as heated.
began her journey back up.
For the word journey, she have it first as jar And then second one is Journey. She unsuccessfully corrected herself.
Trout. The
The learner mispronounced again the word through and have it as trout.
sky into the cloud where she had found water.
The learner replaced the name of butter and have it as water.
With while they were catching up.
For the word while, she attempted it with and then while, and then the third one was will. She unsuccessfully corrected herself.
The cloud cast changing.
The learner repeated the words the cloud and mispronounced the word was into cast.
They saw a flash. They hired.
She also replaced the word then today, and then instead of heard, she have it first as heard and then hired.
A low rumble. Let's go, said Peter. See you in the puddle, said Peter.
Instead of see, she mispronounced it as sig. She also replaced the name of butter into Peter.